Thank you. All right. Welcome to the pre-record live broadcast of A Free Solution. Today's guest, guys, Rich Purtell. You've heard him on here before. He is one of the most proactive individuals that I know. And if you haven't experienced Rich before, let me tell you that he's run for office a couple times. He chairpersons the Legislative Affairs Committee for the LPNY. And I think that our take on the politics of New York State is going to surprise a lot of people. And it's going to help, will really legitimately help New York State. So that's why I love having Rich on. We have a guy out in Rochester, Bob Confer Plastics. Do you know who he is? He's been on A Free Solution a couple times with Kevin. I don't know if you know him, but he was asking about the legislative affairs stuff. So guys, the likes, the comments, the shares, that's what keeps us going. And that's how we do it. All right. All right, we got Hope out in the audience already. Rich, check that out. We're gonna be a big hit tonight, man. We're gonna be making the waves, guys. And look, check it out. Tag your friends, talk to each other in the comments. We'll put up good comments. We'll answer them live on the air. As you probably have participated in this before, there's like a 10-minute, a 12-minute, a 10-minute, 12-minute. So we'll take these extended pauses in between so that I can edit this video easier for my producer. Okay. And he does a lot of editing for me because I'm such a bot. Anyways, so guys, what we're going to do is at 2 minutes and 15 seconds, Rich, we'll start the show and give me a few minutes to introduce everything, introduce you again, and we'll go from there. Hey, it's Tim O'Connor, the Freedom Variant, coming at you on A Free Solution, your Thursday host. And look, as always, I got to give a big shout out. Thank you to WYSL 1040 AM and WACK down in Newark. These guys help us libertarians spread our message of liberty all over New York State. And guys, as you know, if you live in New York State, we have big issues. But one of the guys on the front line of the battle for more freedom, more liberty, and a more effective governance in New York State is my buddy, Rich Purtell. He's run for office. He's like the chairperson of the Legislative Affairs Committee. And every single week, Rich does something important to bring liberty to New York State. So, as always, I love having him on the show. Rich, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing pretty well, Tim. Thanks for having me on.
It's my pleasure, brother. I think we'll start out, if you don't mind. Let's talk about. I've had people asking me, and I know you're more of an expert about it than I am, but what are some of the most important legislative affairs that you see going forward for New York State in this election cycle? Because guess what, guys? During election cycles, these guys might actually take the time to listen to us just a little bit.
One bill, of course, there's a lot of bills that we don't hold a lot of hope for we'd like, but one bill might have some strength is A07225. It's being propelled by the Institute for Justice. It's a civil asset forfeiture bill. And the intent is to try to throttle back on abuse of power by some police departments to capture money from people who may not have committed any crime, might have been tangentially, remotely, 2 and 3 layers removed, like the grandmother of a drug dealer who stayed, one night in her house 6 months ago. Now suddenly they're taking her house, that kind of a deal. So
they do stuff like that, guys.
Things like this happen in New York. It's where it's really bad, in the East Coast is in Philadelphia. It's really a joke down there what they do with the asset forfeiture. I mean, the average amount is like $300. So what they do is they take enough money so that it's helpful to fund the department, but not so much that the person is going to, hire a lawyer and try to fight it. They're just going to say, okay, here's your extortion money. Goodbye.
It's kind of similar to what Justin Trudeau did with his Emergency Powers Act, right? They just, if you're suspected of a crime, they take your money. They've taken like $70,000, $80,000 off. A guy was going to buy a nice car. They take his $70,000. And all they have to do is we suspect you of participating in drug transactions with this money. And then they keep it. And they keep it for years if the person ever gets it back. And sometimes they don't get it back, right? I mean, isn't that what really happens?
Yeah, I mean, another legislative issue we work on is surplus proceeds theft, where people are late on their taxes and they go into
Oh, yeah,
tax
that's a big one.
foreclosure. The state can charge up to 20% interest to some of those people. Plus, on top of that, fees and fines. Hey, why don't we reverse it for asset forfeiture? I mean, if they take your money, they should pay you 20% interest if you're later found innocent. Give you 20% interest on that money they've held for so long.
I would
So
love that. Like they have some, it's a violation of due process, right? It should be a straightforward violation of the Fourth Amendment. They should have to prove something before they take your money, don't you think? Before they
yeah,
take your humanity. They
that's
take that kind of money from you, you're bumming.
yeah. I mean, that's the essential libertarian stance, and the stance I have, and most I think reasonably minded people will have if you explain this to them. It's like there should only be criminal asset forfeiture. Find somebody, charge them, convict them of a crime, and then yeah, sure, take if someone's a drug kingpin and you need to take a lot of property from them due to the crimes they committed. Okay, I can go along with that. There should only be criminal asset forfeiture. Civil asset forfeiture means that they haven't even convicted of anything yet. And again, like the grandmother that housed a drug dealer one night 6 months ago. I mean, come on. How is she liable for that? Give me a break. So, yeah.
Yeah. Another big one, and that A416, I think it was the internment camp for people that are sick. What's the status of that one?
Yeah, they got pulled. And I mean, there's a lot of rallying around that. And, I hate to say, never say never, right? I mean, we've seen some pretty terrible bills passed here. The Hero Act you and I fought, and other people
Oh, we
fought
fought it.
last
We
year. That
fought
was
it so
pretty bad.
hard too, man.
Yeah. I mean, I say that was the worst piece of legislation passed last year, perhaps in the last, several years.
But it's
But
called the Heroes Act, Rich. It's
oh
for
yeah, yeah,
heroes.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
for
You give it a
heroes
good name.
and puppies. And
That's the oxymoron. The better sounding a bill is, the more terrible it probably is in nature. So
yeah.
so if they have to give a bill a really catchy slogan and acronym, then look out. It's probably a really horrible bill. But yeah,
I think you're right. I
but
think
A
you're right
four
on that.
sixteen, I think it would be horrible if something like that passed. There's a lot of pushback against it. But
Yeah,
I commented a few places the last few days. Really, what they're really going to attack, I think, are children. And in two directions. Number one, the mask, kids wearing masks is just ridiculous. They never should have worn it from the very beginning. Nobody should be mandated, but it made no sense at all to make kids wear them in school.
bro.
Even on a voluntary basis, the psychological harm it does to them outweighs the tiny risk they face from COVID. It just never made sense for them to
And the
wear
speech
masks at all.
problems that they get with it. And look, I've later on in the show, you and I are going to kick around some of the news stories that came out this week. And, and I've got horrible news about the mask mandates for kids in schools in New York State. And it's just
There's no end in sight.
horrible.
There's no
Yeah,
end in sight. Yeah, so
it's
I think that the masks are going to keep going. It's easy to beat up on kids. So the masks are going to keep going for the kids. They're going to mandate more vaccines for the kids. They're going to allow really young kids to go to the nurse and get vaccines without the knowledge of their parents.
boy, those are
Uh,
all bills in front of the legislature, right?
yeah, a lot of bills like that. So I think it's easy to attack children because they don't have the political power. So I think that those are the bills that I think are most likely to get passed. And and the thing is, if they get the kids under the thumb of government at a young age, then you got junior communists you're brewing. So
I,
yeah,
yeah, so yeah, we're definitely giving them things that are going to indoctrinate them into the exact system the way that the authoritarians seem to want, and I have real problems with that. So what other? I know we've talked about zoning a lot and how zoning basically in my city that I grew up in, zoning created Airbnb and created an affordable housing crisis and created a rental business that only services college kids, Airbnb, and that's it. So let's talk about zoning. What do you say? You got
have you been
anything?
following that Caroline, New York on Route 79 in Tompkins County?
I've a little bit. You guys have been sending me information.
Yeah, that's
I,
pretty neat. Yeah, so it's an
yeah.
unzoned town in Tompkins County, New York, on Route 79 between Ithaca and Richford. Those two towns, connects Ithaca City, and
Okay.
Richford's a small town. Uh, but yeah, they're putting up quite a fight against zoning because the people there feel like, hey, we want to do what we want with our property. We don't want central planners to come out and tell us, we can't do this, we can't do that. Lot sizes, minimum parking, et cetera, et cetera. So good for them to see the potential hazards of going down this road. So I hope they're successful in blocking zoning entirely.
Yeah, well, here in again in my small city that I grew up in, the government response to the affordable housing crisis was to change zoning for a developer and give that guy a parking lot. So there's this little business development around this parking lot. They give it to a developer. They change the zoning in his favor, and so he gets everything he wants. And we made a rich guy incredibly richer and with easy access to a market that he wouldn't have had before. And nobody seems to understand that when you explain it to them. Are libertarians the only people that are crazy enough to understand this stuff?
Yeah, I mean that's the thing with any law is that who benefits the most from any law? It's usually the most politically connected, the most powerful and politically connected. They can either make use of the law as it's written, or often worse yet, get an exemption from it. Find some variance. It means getting a variance or exemption from it, so that us
Yeah.
poor slobs have to follow the rule, but they don't have to. So
They probably changed the zoning for this one block area, right? Where they said, all right, basically it was a need for parking spaces, right? So this it was like one spot per apartment was now allotted, whereas any other time they've done it has been 2 spots per apartment. And so they have to have these massive tracts of land associated with their housing developments that basically made it cost prohibitive. Again, we raised expenses on the people who we want to live here, people who can use affordable housing and supply us with people that are going to do jobs every day, right? But we have no
the
worries about that because we don't have a lot of business here
the,
anyway.
the basic question there is who knows better how much parking is needed for development? The people that are
Correct.
going to buy the houses or rent the apartments in the development along with the developer, or
Yeah.
central planning governor
Let me jump
government.
in. We're heading to a break, Rich. I hang you out for another segment,
Okay.
would you?
Yep.
All
I'll be back.
right. It's Tim O'Connor, the Freedom Variant. We will be right back. Bro, I hit that timing like perfect. I never get that right. That was like we nailed it. We got exactly 10 minutes, man. That was great. So we got to go. It- People on the TikTok are asking about this Justin Trudeau thing. We are going to be talking about Justin Trudeau. Rich and I are probably going to do another segment on some of the laws in New York State. And basically, you guys out there know Rich and I and Eric and Emmy, we all need help with this thing, this legislative affairs committee, because if we don't do something, if we don't communicate with our elected representatives, as what was his name? Tom Stebbins said, 5 cat ladies will control the entire state. They'll write all of the legislation for us. And I beat that joke to death, but it's true, right? The squeaky wheel gets the grease. And if we don't empower guys like Rich with people to help him, send letters, talk to people, call people, stuff like that. Okay. Like that's important. So let me get this down. We'll go back if you're ready to go. We'll go back at 14. And so we'll do a little bit more. You got a couple more things of legislation you want to talk about, right?
We hit several pieces. I think those are the hot ones.
Yeah.
I talked
All right.
about zoning, and we could talk about the Salkwas bill, the ballot bill.
Yeah. We can always put in a plug for the insurance one.
Scaffold law.
Yes. Thank you. All right, welcome back to A Free Solution. It's Tim O'Connor, your Thursday host, living large and in charge, exploring libertarian politics on WYSL and WACK. And as you guys probably know, if you were here for the last segment, my friend Rich Purtell, an amazing individual in his own right, is joining me right now to discuss legislation. We've got a couple. We're going to talk about Justin Trudeau. We're going to talk about a absolutely horrible poll, as far as I'm concerned, that just came out from Siena College. But I want to talk about statistics. And Rich and I went to the same college. We understand statistics on the same level, and you guys can either trust us or not. I don't care. But anyway, Rich, let's get back to if there was one thing you could change in New York State about the legislation. What is the biggest bill you think costs us the most money, causes the most problems?
One long time policy problem that's over 100 years old is what's called the scaffold law.
Yeah.
And what this is it's been built through precedent, court precedent over the years, and every other state has done something about it. But New York, um, there's an absolute liability standard for any gravity related injury on a construction site. And you sue the owner, and it goes down through the contractor and subcontractor. So they sue to sue to sue. So each layer, of course, has a trial lawyer or attorney representing them to take a little bit of a commission from all that. But the nice thing about it for trial lawyers is you're always guilty. There's no possibility of contributory negligence or any other factor that might reduce the settlement, or at least see if it's a case. Let's say you're issued safety equipment and you don't use it, and you're drunk on the job site, et cetera, et cetera. If the employee really should have a lot of responsibility in a case like that, nope, doesn't change one bit. You could still get millions of dollars of a settlement, even though you're largely at fault. There was even a commercial run down, I think, in the uh, near Texas or something, thousands of miles away from us, trying to recruit workers up here based on this law, saying, hey, it showed like somebody falling off a building and dying on their phone, calling their lawyer on the way down, say, hey, make sure you get lots and lots of money for me. So
I mean,
it's just ridiculous.
because of the scaffold law, there's deep liability pockets that people don't understand, that the connection to the building costs of commercial projects in New York State, schools, bridges, roads, because of this liability policy that they have.
And
right?
Bridges are a good example, because I think I've heard statistics of some bridges being inflated in price by hundreds of millions of dollars. Like there's a bridge that went between New York State and New Jersey, and the New Jersey side of the bridge, there was several $100 million difference for the same length of section of bridge for that side of the bridge versus the New York side of the bridge. And it was all because of insurance costs. An excuse made often about not reforming this is they're saying, well, the insurance companies are making too much profit. They're price gouging us. Hey, look, they're all competing. And there's hardly any insurers left that want to even insure this type of liability in New York State. So if they're making so darn much money on it, why aren't there loads of insurance companies coming to New York and say, hey, let's get in on this gig. Let's make this some money here. Usually if no one wants to get into the business, that's because it's not very profitable. It's just a back-asswards logic there. If you had people scrambling to do it, that would mean to be profitable. People are getting out of it. That means it's not profitable. There's something wrong with it.
I think that the laws in New York State are structured in such a way as to benefit crony capitalists that are investing in our politicians. So when whatever 2 or 3 liability companies that do business here, they're glad. And I think that we have other laws probably besides the scaffold law that help keep them out. If I was to, the insurance regulation businesses probably plays a role, I mean, fixed game scenario kind of thing, but I'm just saying.
Yeah, and I'm not an expert on the whole workers' comp system in New York. You might even know more about that than I do. But
I know that I know that it's incredibly expensive,
it's
and that
expensive, it's complicated, and there's certainly need for reform and repair there. I've heard that, time and again, that the workers' comp system in New York is hostile compared to many other states.
Well, once you get to a point in your business, say you've been in business for 5 years, you're not doing roofing, you're only doing carpentry or electric or something like that, then all of a sudden, right, it gets competitive. But when you first start a construction business in New York State, if you want to have employees, and you have to go through the state insurance fund, which is actually a private business, but so intermeshed and intertwined with New York State, you have to come up with $20,000-$30,000 for your first insurance policy. And then maybe you get some of that back at the end of the year. Maybe you don't. It's all up to them. And they have these funky accounting things that it got to be nonsense. So it's once you get into business and you're in business for a long time, then somehow you start getting offers from other workers' comp companies, and then it becomes way more affordable.
Yeah, well, they have your experience multiplier, right, where they adjust your rate based on your safety record. And if you're a new business starting out, you don't have that record, so I would imagine being if it's a state fund, that they're going to be very, very, very careful, and they're going to nail you hard with a high rate until you establish yourself over several years with a good safety record.
All right, so I want to segue to talking about Larry Sharp, but this is going to be like a baseball bat kind of segue, right? Like I called in and talked to Craig today on the radio, and he was talking about how we should have public referendums and whatnot. And I'm like, in New York State, aren't you the tiniest bit concerned that if we start taking things to public referendums, that it's not going to end the way that we want it to? And so, how I segue that to Larry Sharpe is that if Larry Sharpe becomes increasingly popular this election cycle, which I believe he will, but I want him to be like come in second. I want him to come in first, and I know that that may be. I don't know how to say it. I don't want to say unrealistic because he's going to put his all in, right? So when we get to Larry Sharpe and his philosophy for governing, how do you feel about the future of New York if we can make him more popular? Do you think that helps?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, certainly does. He's got good ideas and to help stimulate change. Again, we've got the Democrats right now have a stranglehold on the state legislature and the governor's spot. It would be nice to see some type of change of power there, or switch of the governor, or the one house of the legislature like it used to be. We used to have one house Democrats, one house Republican. Um, yeah, I mean, but Larry's got a lot of great ideas, and I wish him well this election cycle.
He does, and he built what I find to be, from my perspective, a compelling slate of people to run with him. Like Andrew Hollister is running again, and Andrew started this show. It used to be called Radio Free New York. He's been an impactful player in libertarian politics. I do believe he's a registered Republican, but I think he's a good guy. He did help garner support in Western New York, no matter what, right? And Larry got a lot of votes out in Western New York. So the Rochester area.
Yeah, how much time we have left in this segment?
We got about 4 minutes. So if
well, you kind of segue. Hopefully, I got enough time to dig into it. Kind of segue to the next point. Yeah, Andrew's from the right location, Western New York. Apparently, Zeldin's picking Allison Esposito,
okay.
New York Police Department cop, to probably be his running mate for lieutenant governor. I think it's a huge strategic error. I think that you need someone from Western New York, or maybe Syracuse or Albany. I think a Republican ticket that comes all downstate, I think is going to look bad. I think it's going to turn people off, and I think it's going to be helpful to Andrew Hollister and Larry Sharpe. Larry is from Queens, but he relates very well up to upstate New Yorkers, and Hollister is an upstate New York native, and really big on the Second Amendment issues, and so I think that'll be a much more balanced ticket. I'd hate to see a Republican ticket that's all downstate. Well, hate to see it as a voter, like to see it as a libertarian, because I know it's going to hurt him and it's going to help Sharpe and Hollister.
It will help Sharpe and Hollister, and that's, I think Larry got most of his support from upstate New York last go around anyway. Like for some reason, and he probably is going to do better this time. He picked an attorney general that's from his area down near Queens and has a big law firm. And the guy, I presented some of my concerns, as always, as you've heard me whine about, or as you've heard me talk about. The family court system in New York State is broken, and I've been one of the successful ones navigating it, okay? But I still recognize that it's broken, it hurts people, and so that's a reality that needs to be dealt with. And I talked to Mr. Hayes about that. He certainly seemed sympathetic. I don't think that he understands the issues the way that I understand them, or Mr. Griebsland understands them, but I felt as though he had a sympathetic ear there. He also says he's pro two-way, and he is a lawyer, and I think that's a valuable addition to the ticket.
Yes, I think he will be. And then William Schmidt, I'm proud to see him jump in as New York State Comptroller candidate. He's got a very good perspective on procurement policy, the way government buys things, and the proper competition and fair rules, et cetera. And then he's made comments today about the pension fund. That's a snowballing problem, and the comptroller has to get on that. They're overzealous with their estimates of percentage of returns. So that means that, you're kicking the can down the road. That means it's going to be underfunded sometime in the future, and the taxpayers are going to have to cough up a lot of money to fill it back up again. So William Schmidt will really pound on that issue.
Yeah. So since we got talking about it, we were talking about Mike Carpinelli, who I met personally. I thought he was a great guy. I think he would be a valuable addition to the Republican ticket. But
oh yeah, he would have been a great choice for lieutenant governor.
They don't see things the way that we see them. They're playing a different game than we are. They're trying to beat the Democrats at the Democrat game, and I don't think that they can do that. The Democrats, got the game, man. Like they got it figured out. So
Well,
I like Sheriff Mike. He's a good guy. I saw him speak live. I met him face to face.
yep,
He's a good
very
dude.
constitutional, very
Yeah, he's
constitution
very
minded.
constitutional. I
Right.
mean, he's a
Yep.
cop, so like there's always
Yeah.
that. I'm a libertarian, he's a cop. There's always that problem, like And we asked him about his pro 2A stances, and there was a little like he's very pro 2A, but his answer about no knock warrants and stuff like that, where we kind of put it to him, I was a little less like he is a cop. I had to give him some leeway there, right? Because that's going to be hard for him to get
But
his brain around what I
sheriffs
really
typically
asked him.
go better with sticking up for the Constitution than city police. So I think that's so
Yeah.
the sheriff, especially a good constitutional sheriff, or that really stands up for the people. People elect them. That's who they're supposed to serve.
Yeah, guys, we're coming up on another break. Rich, hang out for another segment with me. It's Tim O'Connor, the Freedom Variant, coming at you on WYSL and WACK. Be right back. All right. I kind of messed up my edit there. I need at least 5 seconds, but whatever. I'll patch it in there, and Bob will do his best to figure out what I was trying to do. So, guys, look I'm Shelly, I'm on TikTok at the same time, and I have people in my audience a little bit, and people have been they do these challenge duels on TikTok. TikTok's hilarious, guys. First of all, the world does not have enough humor anymore, and I do my best to bring a little bit of humor back to the political world. I enjoy what I'm doing, but TikTok, man, there's funny people all over the place on TikTok. They're making fun of the system. They're making fun of the woke culture. They're making fun of each other. The woke culture is making fun of the other cultures. It's a path forward, man. We used to laugh back, Rich, when we were younger. We laughed about everything, didn't we?
Yeah, I think a little humor is definitely needed.
Yeah. So we're going to Shelly, I think we should pivot to Justin Trudeau because there's breaking news about Justin Trudeau, but we'll have to do it. I want to do it as part of the radio show. Certainly the WYSL and WACK listeners are no fans of Justin Trudeau. And let's do a little shout out to Robert. Thank you for being here, brother. Robert was with me at the state convention. He caught some of my questions. I bet he wishes that I asked a little bit more pointed questions of Mr. Hayes. But like I said, it's a unique style. And we haven't even got to talk about Thomas Daniel Queter for U.S. Senate, bro. We should probably put a plug in for him in the first part of the next segment. Because he is, honestly, I feel like Tom has a lot of potential to make a lot of news and really get some libertarian ideals out there. What do you think?
Yeah, I think he does. I think he's still building a platform since he shifted from a state race to a federal race. So I'm not sure where he's going with his. What are going to be his top 3 or 5 priorities? I'm interested to see.
He's got look, when he ran his race, man, he came up with planks and platforms and ideas and things that he was going to try to pass into law and all of that stuff. And yes, Brian, you are correct. We met Sheriff Mike up at our mutual friend Brian's place. Absolutely. Have you met Brian LaRusso face to face? You got to meet this guy one of these days.
One of these days. We exchange messages a lot on Facebook, but yeah, he seems like very level headed. Wants to see freedom and liberty for all.
He's level-headed. I mean, Brian, if you're out there,
let's say unbiased. I think
he is unbiased.
He calls a spade a spade. Yeah, calls. That's what I mean by level-headed. He calls a spade a spade. He's got good judgment. He doesn't hold back if it's a Republican doing it wrong, Democrat doing it wrong, Libertarian doing it wrong. He looks at what they're saying and judges based on what they're saying. So that's what I mean by level-headed. That's how we should all act. Don't get stuck so much in our own camp that we are no longer willing to criticize.
He did a great job, like ferreting out some incompetence and some corruption, and then like things happened. Like he had the Conservative Party nod, and then the Conservative chairman decided to give the guy who he beat for the Republican nomination the nod, and it was just drop of the hat, willy nilly, change midstream, and it's just the things that are come across as corrupt that are technically legal is, in my mind, drives me absolutely crazy. I don't get it. Shouldn't have been legal. So next segment, we'll start off talking about Queter, and probably go 29 at 29:15 will be our goal. and then we'll go to the Trudeau stuff. All right.
Okay.
And then the last segment, we'll do the poll. I'm sorry, 30-15. Once again, welcome back to A Free Solution. It's Tim O'Connor, your Thursday host, the Freedom Variant. I am still joined by my buddy Rich Purtell, and we are talking about politics in our great state of New York. And we talked about legislation, we talked about Larry Sharp's slate of candidates, and now I think we're going to bring some more news about Thomas Daniel Queter, who's been on this show, who's called into this show, who is in fact a great libertarian. Rich, what do you think? What's the prognosis for Tom's Senate race?
Yeah, I'm not sure if he covered this on your show, if it was before he was nominated or
It was
of course you have
before.
different listeners on each show. So I'll bring up a key point here. Why is he not running for state Senate again? Well, as you know, we had a census and we lost a congressional seat, and then there was an independent, air quotes here, independent petitioning commission to draw up the new lines, and that they couldn't come up to an agreement. So it turned into a normal partisan circus in the legislature, and new maps were drawn. And how it impacted Tom is his district was completely butchered. I think only about 10% of his voter base is still in his district. So he's got a whole new, if he stayed running for state Senate, it'd be a whole new district. I was in his district before. I would not be now. He'd be moving, moving from Shenango County north and east toward Utica instead of predominantly going south and west toward Binghamton and Tioga County. So his district was completely butchered.
So
and then he got thinking, hey, this is a sharp year. We're going to be running a statewide slate. Why don't I throw my hat in to try to run for a statewide contest? And the U.S. Senate seemed like a logical choice for him. So that's how he got to this position.
I certainly want to say, like, he's been successful fundraising. He's been successful in gaining popularity on social media. He's been successful even getting some tiny bits of news coverage here and there. I think he's an ideal guy to really make some noise for the Libertarian Party and just getting Chuck Schumer's face once or twice and just make a mess of it, man. I can't. He would destroy Chuck Schumer in any kind of televised debate. He would destroy him. It would be embarrassing. As a matter of fact, guys, I guarantee that Chuck Schumer is too scared to debate Thomas Daniel Queter. I guarantee it. He won't do it because it would be an embarrassment for him. He would look silly.
Yeah, the phrase that Tom uses, I'm running in this race to punch Chuck Schumer in the nose. So I love that quote. I want to punch Chuck Schumer in the nose. So yeah, it's like,
love it.
Yeah, I mean, Schumer's got, what, $1 trillion or something like, some ridiculous amount of money. So you'll never compete on him financially.
No.
He's older than dirt. He's been there forever. I've heard him, nauseating speeches from him for two different daughters' graduation speeches from SUNY system. So I've it's the same canned speech he gives at just about every campus every year. So it's tiresome. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Schumer's like Teflon, man. He's had some bad behaviors. He's got caught in some dicey situations where other guys would get destroyed, but because he has so much money and he has look, guys, money buys power, money buys speech, money buys support, right? So if you're supporting people and you have money to support them, they are going to support you and they're going to make sure that you stay in the position that you're in because that's better for them. And I think that's what's going on with Chuck Schumer. I don't know.
We were surprised that Cuomo, who was a Teflon man in his own right, somehow managed to get booted out, but we can only hope. But yeah, Schumer's definitely been Teflon man for, he's been in office, what was it, 40 years now or something? It's just ridiculous. He needs to retire. Hopefully this is his last term, 6 more years or maybe not even a full term. Let's get him out of there.
My first year of college, second year of college, he got elected to the Senate. And so that, I'm not telling that people how many years ago that was, but like 37 or some nonsense like that. It goes way back then. And then, guys, I'll be perfectly honest. Way back then, he sounded way more like Ronald Reagan than he does like Chuck Schumer. Okay, period. He mimicked Ronald Reagan to get elected in New York State to the best of his ability. And now look at him. This guy is a paper towel that just, when the wind blows, that's the direction he moves in. He's a populist. And as you guys have heard me talk about populism is dangerous. It devolves into fascism. And guys, when we take a look at what's going on in, this is my segue, Canada,
Canada.
in Canada, how do we not start pointing our ugly, angry fingers at this word of fascism? And so, but first, before we go down this road, I got to tell you guys, Justin Trudeau withdrew the Emergency Powers Act already, just like that. I guess a petty tyrant, when he feels some breezes of freedom, like he was scared. I think. What do you think about that, Rich? Have you heard anything about that?
No, I haven't been following the Canada situation maybe as close as I should be. So you're more tuned into it, but and I hear that they're going to have a convoy. I've been seeing planning messages here through Binghamton and DC and so on. So they're going to try to emulate what they're doing in Canada and the United States. So leave it to the truckers. Kudos to the truckers for having the bravery and the integrity to organize this and.
Yeah. Do you remember Convoy back in the day, the movie and the song and all that stuff? It was a song about anti-authoritarianism back in the 70s. I don't know if you remember it. Then they crafted it into a movie, and it was all about fighting this one or two sheriffs and then multiple police departments about toll booths and about this 55-mile-an-hour speed limit, because it was killing their business. It was killing their way they made money.
Yeah, you and I are about the same age. I mean, the emergence of the CB radio, emergence of the CB radio was largely an anti-government tool. The reason that exploded is because of truckers getting irritated and annoyed by the government. I mean, with speed traps and so on. I think, I think the CB radio took off largely as a protest against government power.
It certainly was, and it was certainly a workaround, right? They would be warning each other where there were roadblocks and way stations and stuff like that, because they had the speed to make money, right? Like, and let's be honest, who even, guys out there, who even goes 65 now? Okay, our roads are engineered for us to drive 85, 90 miles an hour. Our roads are engineered to land planes within every 20 miles. There's a stretch straight enough that you could land a big, huge government plane on it, and that's an absolute reality. We can't deny that. So our roads are engineered for even higher speeds than we're driving now. And so to save gas, guys, look, we've done so much stuff to save gas. Matter of fact, we decided to save gas and enrich Russia. And like, look, the conservatives can sound crazy about that to people that are on the left, but it's a reality, right? We empowered Russia with lots of funding for their current military actions, period. What do you think about that? Do I sound crazy? Do I sound like I've gone back to my conservative roots and given up on libertarianism?
No. A key point I make, I ask people to look up the statistics of Western Europe. Western Europe doesn't want to drill. They want to drill, don't want to drill for oil and gas.
No,
They
don't
create a
want
lot of these
nuclear power.
problems. If you're so against drilling, and of course New York, we won't frack, right? That's another whole issue. But my mom's gets, that's what keeps her alive. She gets more than my salary in a gas royalty check every month.
Nice.
And she lives 8 miles from me across the border in Pennsylvania, and yet we can't do any of that in New York. So, but Western Europe, if they would only drill for oil and gas that they need to burn, they'd be, they would improve their security, it would improve their economics. They've got the resources. They refuse to get them. So then they got to import all this fuel from the Middle East, and then you got pipelines crossing across Ukraine and Syria, and through Israel has the Leviathan gas field. It's like a trillion cubic feet of gas. If you go and look at all these, strategic reserves of oil and gas, I call these pipeline wars. A lot of what's going on is because of pipeline wars. As if Europe would just drill, for their own benefit, it would create more stability. Russia's a poor country, and they need to export lots of oil and gas. So a lot of what they're doing is to maintain, and even when they intervene in Syria, they want to make sure they can keep selling oil and gas. That's what keeps their economy going.
Yeah, we drew down our national petroleum reserves to try to lower prices, and then this conflict arose, and we've quashed access to new drilling sites. We stopped that Keystone pipeline, so we're making Warren Buffett rich. Like, guys, we're still using oil, okay? It's still coming down from Canada, but it's coming down on trains, okay? So, like, eminent domain's always an issue. I understand that. That's fair. Indian burial grounds, that's also fair. But to just quash it and stop it without any kind of replacement of that level of supply. And look, we can want nuclear power. We can work towards energy independence, but we're still going to need oil to get there. Like, we got to stop kidding ourselves.
Well, you kind of triggered me too to bring up bring up our friend. You were on the show with him, Colin Grabo
Oh
of the
yeah, I love
Cato
that guy.
Institute. So
Yeah.
he brings up the Jones Act. There's no Jones Act compliant liquefied natural gas vessels in the United States. So you can't transport that type of fuel
All
to
right,
the
hold,
Northeast.
listen, hold that thought. We're coming up on a break. Tim O'Connor, Rich Purtell. I'm the Freedom Variant. Rich is the LPNY legislative expert. We'll be right back. All right. So the TikTok viewers that's hanging in there, man, I really appreciate it. If you give me some likes, you give me some love, I would still appreciate that too. Check it out. I'm talking to the TikTok people. I had like 40 people in the TikTok is great because you just scroll through and you see all sorts of lives. And if you like them, you just stop and check them out. If anybody wants to hang out and do a battle after this, and I got one more radio show segment, and I'll have time for that then. But you got to have 1,000 viewers, or followers, which I just barely have. But thanks to the modern miracle of bot technology. I don't even know who these people are. I don't know why they follow me, but they did. They keep sending me DMs, and they're all really good looking ladies. So I don't understand what's going on, man. Maybe it's the face I got. I don't know. I really
Must be
don't
the
know.
hat.
Yeah. So look, Rich, let's just shoot this around before we go back to the show. You and I got to the Libertarian Party. I was like kind of a liberal, but I kind of hated all the wokeness going on back in the 80s, right? Like even then everybody was talking about free college and stuff like that. And I'm like, well, I'm just going to work and pay my college bills. And then I'm going to, do whatever I want as I get older. So I got here kind of I went from liberal, kind of a Bill Clinton fan. Then I kind of realized like, I'm kind of a small government fan. Every time the government tries to do something. And so I think I'm sensing you got here similarly. What do you think? Is that
Yeah,
fair?
I think what turned me off in the '80s was the corruption, especially with the corporate welfare, military industrial complex. You know,
Yeah.
so but I
War
wasn't
sucks,
into
man.
big
I hate it.
taxes or I didn't like a social welfare system either, even in the beginning. I just think government just needs to be there as a referee, much like Milton Friedman says.
I love
Government
Milton
should be a
Friedman.
referee and stay out of the game.
I,
This just
Yeah,
don't
I
rig
studied
things.
economics when I went to SUNY Binghamton under the Professor Colonel, man, and I guess he's still like a professor emeritus there. Um, and he, like Milton Friedman, resonated with me. Some of the big MMT stuff and the money supply stuff was like literally boring, and it doesn't make sense. Okay, like it. I'm not sure if it meets up with our reality, like the money effect and the multiplier effect and things like that. So I don't know, but I enjoyed the discussions of freedom. I had a guy that was on Ronald Reagan's. I did kind of the both ends of the spectrum. Right, I had a guy that was an economic advisor to Ronald Reagan, David Waldorf, if I remember correctly, and I love that guy because regularly he would have to fly down to Washington D.C. to talk to Reagan and his group of economic advisors, and so he would cancel class. I love that guy. And he had like a midterm and a final and no homework. And then I took a class with this guy that was like a radical political economist, and he was clearly like down with Marx's ideas, and he's like, none of you are ever going to be capitalists. This is what's going to happen, and he's right. He was right. Like I hate to say it, but like you know, I don't know. Maybe I'm kind of higher percentage capitalist than he predicted, but still, he made a lot of good points to it. And some of the points that Reagan made did not conflict with some of the points that the Marxist professor I had made about how poor people want opportunity and how we have to recognize what a savings account is. Like sometimes a junk filled yard is actually a savings account. I don't know. Did you get any of that stuff while you were there?
Everything I took was more engineering, economics oriented, so a little bit different. That was more. I did take a micro and macro course. I did take those for my electives, but the other economics courses were engineering oriented, so more about present value of money, escalation rates, things like that. More based on investments and depreciation and so on.
Cool. Yeah, no, and Sweet Ripton's gotten a lot bigger since we were there. They're like Division One in basketball, even though they don't. The one time they made it to the NCAA tournament, that the coach got busted for like recruiting violations. I don't know if you caught that, but that
Yeah.
it was his last year coaching at SUNY Binghamton. He got himself in a lot of trouble. All right, so when we come back to the show, we covered Queter, we covered Larry, we covered a little bit about Trudeau, but honestly, him backing down, that's it. He knows he was put himself in an untenable spot. But I had the Siena College poll that I want to talk about. That is absolutely, it's kind of devastating news for people that love freedom, right?
Oh, that's the one about the mask.
Yeah,
Kids wearing masks. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's kind of depressing. We'll go back at 45:30, and that's a 12-second one or 12-minute one. Welcome back to A Free Solution. Once again, it's your Thursday host, Tim O'Connor. Let's not forget, guys, on Mondays, we get your Kevin Wilsons. On Tuesday, we get the man, the myth, the legend himself, Larry Sharp. Wednesdays, Craig Miles has been holding down the fort. And I don't know if you've checked out any of his stuff, but he has pretty cool take. Then Thursday, it's me, lovable me, Tim O'Connor, the Freedom Variant. And then for Friday, it's Kevin Wilson and I kind of making fun of the news, kind of making fun of each other, and kind of trying really hard to have a good time. So, Rich, I've been promising some absolutely horrible news. I like literally, it broke my heart to read it. But a Siena College poll got released yesterday, I believe, and 58%, 58% of the people polled, they're all supposedly registered voters. 58% want the mask mandate to continue on our children in school. 58%.
Yeah, it's a saddening poll if that's accurate. First, I wonder, is that all parents? Is that all parents of kids, or is it people that are not parents?
They broke that
Yeah.
number out for us, okay? Believe it or not. When they asked people that didn't have any children at home, it was 66% of them. Of course, because it's not their kids. Like, keep them masked in school because we've terrorized people, right? We've made them afraid of COVID from schools, which I still haven't seen one article about a school being a super spreader event. Have you?
No, no, but I have seen disturbingly more articles of late, exacerbating and amplifying and discussing the impact of COVID upon children. They never talk about rates or statistics. Again, you and I are big on statistics, right? You can
Yeah.
find a horrible story about some disease for just about anybody. Okay, that's terrible that this happened to this person. Now, does that happen to one person out of 1,000, one person out of 1,000,000, one person out of 1,000,000,000? What's the
You're
frequency?
you're
And
97 times more likely to die from COVID if you're unvaccinated or end up in it with serious consequences. You know what that statistic means? When you know statistics, it means exactly nothing. It means nothing because we have not taken into account any of the variables associated with whether you're vaccinated or not, whether this is real, and what your real percentage chances of getting COVID and experiencing a severe problem with COVID are, and what you can do to mitigate those risk factors. None of that gets taken into account. They just make these outlandish claims, and it's basically it should be labeled as disinformation in the mainstream media, and it shouldn't even be discussed. Sorry, I get a little passionate about that one.
yeah, and yet this is what I'm seeing in the newspaper. Binghamton Press here day after day now. And doesn't it just seem very, very coincidental that these articles exploded in volume right after the FDA approved vaccines for age 5 to 18 or 5 to 12? I guess was the last round. I
Yeah,
mean, you should almost do a study on that. What's the volume of articles like this in relation to when the vaccines are approved? If you want to find
and
correlation, I bet you'd find one there.
there's a correlation too between Joe Biden deciding that he wasn't getting the most favorable news coverage and holding a conference, and all of a sudden his news coverage has been impeccable, regardless of his poor decision making. Like I said, I try not to even think about federal level politics because if I do, I think about Joe Biden and I get really disappointed. I'm not gonna lie. He look. So when we go back to this mask thing, I did about 7 years ago, give or take. I got a Siena College poll call, and I'm reaching out, and hopefully somebody knows somebody that got called for this one because I went to the Siena College site. It's busted right now. I can't get the questions that they actually asked, or I would probably be able to destroy them right here on the air for everyone. But it was vaguely like a push poll, and they were labeling it as a Siena College poll, and it was a push poll for Hillary Clinton. And I was like, do you, I got about they got about 3 questions in, and I'm like, hopefully this screws up your whole study because I'm not answering any more questions. This is basically a push poll.
Right.
You guys are
Leading
advertising for
questions.
Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it was
Yep.
Siena College had it labeled that way. Like, so I don't know, you know. So let's just throw a couple of numbers around there. And this is, guys, this is going to be a big illustration of what's going on in New York State. There remains a deep partisan divide over the issue. The poll found 74% of Democratic voters support Hochul's plan to keep the mask mandate in place until at least early March. Only 30% of Republicans back the move, and independent voters are split. 54% in favor and 44% want it to end next week or believe it should have ended already. Now, does anything about those statistics leap out at you? For instance, I will say that if somebody was able to sway a decent percentage of independent voters in New York State, because they're almost in Senate District 51, they're like 35 or 40% of the voters. There was not a distinct advantage of Republican and Democrat. There was almost an advantage to independent voters.
Yeah, I guess that's the stat that jumps out at me. I would have predicted that independent voters would have been more like 70-30 instead of 54-44. I would have thought that the majority, 2/3 or so of independent voters would have been in favor of ending the mask mandates. So that's a disappointing. That the Republican and Democrats percentages don't surprise me, but that the independent percentage is disappointing.
Yeah. So as I read through the article, and I'll post a link to the article, but as I read through the article, I felt as though I was able to infer that there was a kind of a trick way that they asked the question, and then see if follow along with me and see if I can get it, because sometimes it's hard for me to verbalize these issues, but like most voters want to wait until after the kids' vacation to lift the mask mandate. Now, I think that is a problem in and of itself. The way that question gets asked, like there's nothing on the line for these people, and in a state that's almost 60% Democrat voters, I think that you mentioned Kathy Hochul's name in the question, and you're basically phrasing it in a way like, do you trust Kathy Hochul?
Right, right.
Don't you feel like, am I going too far out on a conspiracy limb there?
No, no, I think that creates a bias in the person you're asking a question of, because if now you're putting in a position where if they say no, they feel like they're rejecting Kathy Hochul rather than just bringing up the policy and leaving the politician's name out of it. So it's
Yeah.
a leading question by asking it in that way.
Okay.
And
So
it's leading the other way too. I mean, if the Republican voters more likely to slam it, oh, it's Kathy Hochul. No, I don't like it then. So it
true.
probably swings both ways. You're getting bias from both sides by interjecting a person's name when it's not necessary. Just ask the darn question. Leave the politicians' names out of it.
So one more problem that illustrates one of the issues in New York, even a plurality of voters. All right. So that means this is the highest category of like 3 choices. Okay. A plurality of voters, 45%. 45% of the people that were polled in the Siena College poll say the mask mandate should still be in place for indoor spaces in New York. 45%. And then, but then check this out. This is how the questions break down. While 20% believe last week was the right time to end the mandate, and 31% wanted it to end earlier. So the article gets written as a plurality of voters say the mask mandate should still be in place for indoor spaces, when really it's 51% believe that it should be over 100%. Do you see what I mean? Like they give somebody like 8 different questions, and then you associate their favorite authoritarian with the answer to one of them. And don't you think that's gonna? We're on it, right? That biases the poll.
Yeah. Like you say, if you spin the language, in truth, the majority, 20% last week, 30% even earlier than that. And so in truth, 51%, just barely a majority, want the mask mandate to end either almost right away or even in the past. So
Right.
they use that plurality word, to try to reverse the results of that poll, to make it sound like, substituting the word plurality for majority. Because if they said majority at 45%, well, that's obviously a lie, but they can get away with the word plurality there.
So, guys, if I'm going to do some research, and if I can get a hold of the actual questions that Siena College asked, I will present them with Kevin and I for our radio show tomorrow. Okay. But I just got this feeling. Excuse me for one second. I just got this feeling I'm going to be able to point at some obvious, even more obvious biases that I
Bogus
was able to
questions.
point at from the
Yep.
article.
Yep.
So
well, a lot of
Rich,
us were saying from the beginning that masks for children would have created, even if they had a physical health benefit, the mental health damage was going to be worse than the physical health benefit from the very beginning. I said that from the very beginning that the kids never should have been masked. That the harm to them psychologically from the mask exceeds what tiny benefit there is physically, if there is one at all.
Right. And even now, I saw, guys, like the news is breaking. Some of the narratives dissolving, but like the New York Times came out with an article that said that the CDC has been holding back information about vaccine efficacy because it doesn't fit the narrative that they want. And so we're living in a time where things have become so politicized that the CDC itself is withholding information from everyday people. We're coming up on any last words, Rich, because we're coming up on the end of the show.
No, it's just, again, I really appreciate you having me on and having a chance to talk about a lot of different things tonight.
Frankly, bro, it's been too long because I really enjoy talking to you and I enjoy sharing what your efforts in particular are for the Libertarian Party. And you and I are very simpatico about statistics and data and stuff like that. And guys, I want to thank everybody out there who joined us tonight. Thank you for the likes, the comments, the shares. And thanks again, WYSL and WACK. This is Tim O'Connor, the Freedom Variant. I'll be back tomorrow. Man. I nailed it again, man. Like right on the second. I can't even believe it. Honestly, I botch that all the time. And when I'm doing it by myself, which I like doing it by myself a little bit, but you get a little too trapped in your own head. You know what I mean? Like it's like I tried to call in for Craig today because I don't know. It kind of felt like he was and then I tried to get to talk. One thing I want to talk to you about, and I want to talk to every libertarian about, is like, is politics it's a popularity contest, isn't it? Like, isn't that the real issue? Don't we need to be more popular?
Yeah, I'm not a fan of the whole cult of personality problem, but
I know.
I wish
No,
we'd
I
get away
get
with it. I
that
wish it
too.
was
I
more
get
about
that.
ideas. We don't seem to get much depth out of anything. But and this
Well,
is so
one
it's
of my concerns is that we have people that will express or expose or talk about libertarian ideals, and then automatically somebody wants to jump up and lecture them, like because they didn't say it perfectly. Like for example, I got busted on for posting an Aaron Rodgers meme where he said something like, "I don't give a crap about the two-party system, and I won't go on a Democrat show, and I'm not going on a Republican show," or something like that. And I just thought that would be a moment to say, "Here we are." And it wasn't a major bust, but somebody comes along and is like, "I don't like Aaron Rodgers, and he's a jerk for this, and he's a jerk for that." And I'm like, like, come on, man. Like wearing his libertarian gold on his chest and then attacking Aaron Rodgers after he said something halfway cool.
yeah. I
Does that
wish we'd
make sense?
focus more on what's said instead of who says it. That's what it comes down to. That's a spin-off from the cult of personality problem.
Yeah. All right, brother. Look, I appreciate it. I hope we'll do this more often in the future. But I'm gonna bounce off, and I
Okay.
gotta go pick up my wife here
Yep. Well, I'm
shortly.
glad we got to do this early so you can get finished sooner.
Yeah, I still gotta edit it later, so like that
Okay.
takes me a while.
Alrighty.
Yes.
Have a good one.
Wait, hang on before we
Oh,
go. Let's see if we got this one. Popularity, yes, you need to be likable somehow. Do libertarians need more likable candidates like Cohen and Sharp? That's it. You're hitting it. That's my thoughts, right? Cohen and Sharp are incredibly likable, and the world needs to step up and see that, and we need to help get their message out. And I think Rich and I are incredibly likable. What do you think about that, Paula? um, yeah, it's true. It's worse than that, I think. I think if you ever hope to hold office in the city, you have to have a Democrat next to your name. Like, I think that's the case. Like,
Yeah.
even we did that show with Elizabeth Glass, and she basically said, I think I'm a good, I don't know what she said. She may be a libertarian, but she's like, no, I ran as a Democrat, but this is what I want. And I got X amount of votes, like, I don't know. I'm not a big fan of parties other than the Libertarian Party because we stay intellectually, philosophically, and morally consistent, even if we don't agree on everything, guys. It's a popularity contest. We can be nicer. People are curious about us. We don't have to chase them away. That's it. I'm going to finish off the broadcast, guys. You have a great night. Thank you all.
See you, Tim.